on the A2D platform. And, this is something that I was asked to try, and I've never done it before. And it's going to be really rough and tumble for a while until I get the hang of it. But I hope you'll hang in there with me. You might have noticed we're running a little late. We had some problems with settings, but those have all been worked out. And thanks to Ralph, the producer, who did a wonderful job. I've thought a little bit about what I want this space to be. Obviously, they hired me to do this about the Eagles, so it'll be about the Eagles mostly. But I've been known to stray into other areas here and there on my social media, as you might have noticed if you follow me on Twitter. So there'll probably be if the Sixers hire a coach the day that I'm doing the show, or the Flyers suddenly become relevant again, or if the Phillies have lost 37 in a row or something, maybe we'll dabble in that as well. But basically, we're about the Eagles here. I covered the Eagles for 20 years for the Philadelphia Daily News and in the Inquirer, and then last year for a while for NJ.com. I'm not covering the Eagles currently for anybody. I'm retired. I'm 67 years old, but I am keeping up. I'm still reading the transcripts of all the interviews from NovaCare and, following on social media. And I have opinions about things, and I still process and analyze things the way I always did, even, when I was going down there. I'm not going to present myself as something I'm not. I'm not going to pretend that I'm, in the locker room every day or anything of that nature at this point. I'm not. But I am, an interested observer who has some background to analyze, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to bring in some people that I think would be fun to talk to. And my first thought when I was asked to do this was that my first guest should be Paul Domowitch. Domo covers the NFL these days for the 33rd Team site. Does a very good job. But for many, many years, Domo and I were traveling partners with the Daily News. And we've been up and down the New Jersey Turnpike, eating at that Molly Pitcher rest stop many a time after Eagles-Giants games. I'd like to bring Domo in here if I can. And, he can help me out here until I flounder desperately and they cut me off. Maybe bringing Domo in will help. And there he is in all of his Hawaiian shirt glory. I guess Waylon Jennings left you that shirt in his will, perhaps, Domo?
No, Andy Reid let me borrow it.
How you doing?
How you doing, Dad?
I am great. Well, here we both are. This is not anything I think 15 or 20 years ago either of us would have anticipated, but
Indeed.
We're here though, and that's a darn good thing. I'm going to get into our big question today is yes or no. Nick Sirianni, and we're not going to talk about this right now, Domo. I'm just bringing it up. So get your thoughts. Assemble your thoughts on this matter, and then we'll go through other silliness first. But yes or no, Nick Sirianni has a tougher job this year than he had last year. And reasons I think that include, what happens when you're a Super Bowl runner-up most of the time. The fact that, the stakes are so much higher now for Nick, and he's got new coordinators, and a rebuilt defense and a tougher schedule. And some people think that means pressure on Jalen Hurts. I think things are pretty decent for Jalen Hurts as long as the right guard situation works out. I think they have a great offense. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be, in any trouble, but I think Nick has a lot of adjusting to do in this situation. But before we get into that, tell me about your 33rd team work and what you're doing and, how you're occupying yourself these days.
Well, like you, and when I took the buyout, Les, the plan was semi-retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Become a little bit more than that. I started working at the time. The 33rd Team was kind of a small-time operation. Mike Tannenbaum and Joe Banner had started it, and it was just a bunch of interns, and they were looking for somebody to do a few stories. And so, I mean, he didn't even know how much money to pay me.
And you said why, right?
Yeah. About a year later, I woke up one day to find out I was now had colleagues like Chris Long and Rondé Barber and Bill Parcells and Bill Polian. I mean, they went out and they were found financing and just added a whole bunch of analysts, which turned the site into a pretty impressive site if you like pro football. A lot of video analysis from people like Polian and people like that. Also, stories. I mean, I basically, Les, as you know, they let me write whenever I want to. They suggest some stories, but it's so, I can kind of dictate my own schedule. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
They're good people to work for so far. So I'm hopeful that it looks like it's popular. I mean, I think I saw during the draft, I mean, they set all kinds of records for site views. So, that was good for them. Yeah. And I guess for me, if I want to continue to work, the only downside was, when I took the buyout and was going to retire, my main plan was to finish a book on Sam Mills.
Yeah.
The former NFL player who went in the Hall of Fame last year. Still chipping away at it, but not as quickly as I would have if that was all I was working on. But, like you, it's like it's hard to have a big picture project and not see your name and byline and that sort of thing. It's a hard habit to break. So that's
absolutely. I get itchy at the big events. I'm like, I know what I would have written about that. I don't want to do the day-to-day work that you would have to do before the big event, but I'd like to just sort of parachute in and and take command. It's very, very selfish. I never knew I was that much of an egotist, but I guess I am.
It's kind of like who we are. I mean, it's when we took the buyouts and stopped writing regularly for the Inquirer or the Daily News, it was like you lost part of your identity. I mean, you ended up working for NJ.com after that, writing on the Eagles. But, I mean, I covered that team for 40 years and, I mean, they won't give me a credential.
That's a weird thing about the NFL. I think if I haven't checked, but I covered the Flyers but I haven't covered the Flyers the last 20 years. But I think if I wanted to go down to a Flyers practice, I probably could, assuming they were having one. With the Eagles, that's not an option unless you work for an accredited outlet, and they're very tight with that. So it is what it is. I wanted to ask you. You read something yesterday, I guess, about. The good news is the Eagles found a good offensive coordinator candidate, Brian Johnson, to replace Shane Steichen. But the bad news is that he'll probably be one of the top candidates next year in next year's hiring. I hate stuff like this. You're like one of those guys that the day after the draft, here's my mock draft for 2024. Let us have this year first, please. Good God.
Well, in my defense, that was one of their suggestions. They're big on those, and I reluctantly agreed to write it. I wrote today. It's the top GM candidates for next year, but it's it's an interesting dilemma for the Eagles because you assume they're going to be successful this year, particularly offensively. I mean, if Jalen Hurts has another big year, Brian Johnson's going to be a guy that is going to be on everybody's list for head coach next year.
That's true. That's very true. I think there are enough problems in the here and now that we can kind of put that one on the back shelf for a little while.
I think so. Yeah, I agree.
But that was an un-Domo-like thing. This is how you've evolved since leaving newspapers. This was not the sort of thing I would expect to see from Domo.
Yes, I'll do anything for money.
Yeah, me too. So we're talking about the Eagles coming off the Super Bowl, and I was thinking about this yesterday while I was driving around. It we all think they're going to be very good this year, and Jalen Hurts and the whole thing, but we know what's happened every time they've been to the Super Bowl, right? Have they been real good the next year?
They have
Has
not.
something happened every time that yes, something always happens. Somebody, quarterback gets hurt, God forbid, but it could happen. T.O. blows up the team. I wasn't around in 1980. I have no idea. I think Vermeil was starting to blow a gasket in 81, I guess. I don't know why they weren't great that next year. Was there a strike or something the next year? Was that?
No, actually, they got off to I believe, a 6-0 start in 81.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of fell flat. It never panned out for them. They made the playoffs, ended up losing to the Giants in the wild card. I think it was the wild card game. Just played horribly. Kind of played like the Sixers the other night.
Yeah.
I did a story last September, I think, on Super Bowl winners and runners up and the history since in the salary cap era. And it hasn't been kind to the to Super Bowl winners or losers.
Right. The Patriots are the only team that really, has, and now that's over with Brady gone. That's not happening anymore for them.
But there are a lot of reasons. I mean, for starters, they just play for so long that it kind of has consequences on the back end. I mean, you're playing into February. Yeah. You get no rest. You've got, especially if you win, you've got obligations to deal with, and you got a target on your back the next year, which is why it's going to be so difficult. I mean, you had mentioned they're going to probably be a pretty good team this year, and I agree. But everybody's going to be gunning for them now. They're not a secret. Jalen Hurts is not a secret, and that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You can't really think about what's ahead. You can't anticipate exactly where problem areas are going to be. You're always wrong. I mean, there's always something you didn't see coming. They could have both corners down by week 4 or something like that. But looking at this team, it's probably a better situation than they've been in. And I wasn't here for 81, but I was here for 2005. I was here for 2018. And I think 2005, T.O. blew it up, basically, was the problem. Right. And, there were injuries. McNabb got injured eventually, and all the receivers got injured after T.O. blew it up. It was just a mess. 2018, same kind of deal. The quarterback hurt his back. And, Carson Wentz, I think that was really the kind of the first nigglings of doubt that I think a lot of us had was that year. But they got into playoffs with Nick Foles and had a chance to go to the second round, but they weren't as good a team as they'd been the previous season. They had different injuries. They tried to hold on to some guys who kept getting injured over and over again, like Jason Peters and Darren Sproles. I don't really see that this year. They did hold on to some people, but they kind of needed to hold on to them. And they're not people that have been chronically injured a lot. But it's a pretty good team. It's going to be, I think the schedule is something people talk about a lot with this team. I wrote something the other day kind of poo-pooing that notion because I like to be a contrarian. I think the schedule is the schedule. If you're a good team, you're going to play a good schedule. They determine strength of schedule based on what those teams did last year, which to me is kind of like saying it might rain tomorrow because last year on this date it rained. That's not, there's no scientific formula there. Yeah, and it often turns out to be not the case, that the teams that were good last year aren't as good this year. And that, there's, and there are other teams that you didn't think would be a big deal that are. But having all been said, we've looked at the schedule. We've seen that killer stretch after the bye. I guess a lot depends on whether they're healthy, and that's something you just can't think about.
Yeah, I mean, they were one of the healthiest teams in the league last year, and typically teams that go to the Super Bowl are. I mean, because health is such an important factor in being able to go that far. And can they do it 2 years in a row? I mean, can an offensive line that I think had, I want to say their offensive line lost maybe 3 games to injury, which is incredible. I mean, they've lost Sayamalo, but that was by choice now. Pretty much, they've replaced him with one of 2 young guys who they think are going to be great.
Hold that thought, Domo. We're going to talk about that exact situation when we come back. We have to do some business here with one of our sponsors.
There you go.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
We're back. So we were talking about right guard, and that's probably the biggest question I have offensively. What is the biggest question I have offensively? It might be the biggest question on the whole team, really, except for the linebacking situation, perhaps. Are you like me? I've kind of had my antenna up a little bit. I think when the season ended, we all figured if Jason Kelce came back, they would just slide Cam Jurgens over to right guard. But they talked after the season, they were asked about that. And Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman haven't really given any sort of blessing on that move whatsoever. And they drafted a guy, from Alabama who's really good and a bigger guy, I think. And I kind of think they want the rookie to win that job, and they're a little worried about being light maybe on the right side with Jurgens and Johnson. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're probably right. I mean, in that they can start to get Cam Jurgens ready at center if Tyler Steen wins that right guard job, and get Jurgens ready to replace Kelce either next year or if something, God forbid, for his sake, happens to him this year.
Yeah.
But also, the way I look at it though, it's just a blessing. I mean, they once again have so much depth, and not to mention the fact with that depth comes the fact that their offensive line coach is Jeff Stoutland, who pretty much can take anybody and turn them into a star, as we saw with Jordan Mailata. I mean, so. You're in Steen, you're talking about an Alabama kid. Stoutland's obviously got connections at Alabama. He knows, he's talked to their people before they even drafted him about this kid. So, I think they probably would prefer Steen to win the job. Just because if Jurgens wins the job, then next year when Kelce retires, they got to start moving people around again.
Yeah.
And they probably prefer not to do that. So
that's a very good point. When they have an injury in season, they almost never do something that requires 2 moves.
Right.
They always just want to plug somebody in. So you're right. Having to come out with a new center and a new right guard in 2024 probably wouldn't be what they'd be looking to do. A very good point. I mentioned linebacking. Let's talk about that for a second. That's the move that everybody thinks might still be out there, and there's a lot of time left. We're in May. Everybody thinks, free agency and the draft come along and, this is the team. It's not the team, and there'll be moves going into training camp. There'll be moves during training camp. There'll be moves after training camp, right up until the trade deadline. What do you think? Do you think they have what they need at linebacker right now?
Well, I mean, Les, as you know, I mean, it's never been a position in recent years that they have felt is vitally important to their success. They've not invested much of their cap space and cap money in that position. Last year, they pretty much never played with three linebackers. I mean, it was a two linebacker, even on first down, they were a two linebacker defense for the most part. So, I mean, I think they feel I think they feel comfortable with Nakobe Dean, even though he played only 15 snaps last year. I think they probably look at that as a positive because, I think Nakobe Dean's career is going to be the type. I think he's going to be very good, but coming into the league, one of the reasons he slid to them was because people remember with Jeremiah Trotter, he had injuries in college, and the prediction was by teams and scouts that he probably wouldn't have he'd be good, but he wouldn't have a long career. Right. And I think the same thing can be said of Dean, or at least what people think. And by him only playing 15 snaps last year, it's kind of like a running back that's not carried the ball a whole lot in college and now is kind of fresh. So, I like Dean. I liked him when they got him. I think he's going to be a terrific addition there. They lost White and Edwards. I thought Edwards was the biggest loss as opposed to Kaiser White.
Oh yeah.
And the guy they signed, Nicholas, his last name escapes me at the moment. The other linebacker, the veteran, they signed as a free agent to a 1-year deal.
Yes. And I don't have his name right in front of me either, but
anyway, he's probably going to be their other starter. I mean, he was with Pittsburgh for about 5 years. Durable. I don't think he missed more than a game or two. So they probably have a lot of confidence in him. So if those two stay healthy, they're fine. If they don't, then they're tapping people that are basically being counted on to play special teams.
That's exactly right. Well, let's get back to our agree or disagree question for today about Nick Sirianni. I see him as kind of in the hot seat here, not hot seat in terms of obviously losing his job, but I mean in terms of he has to pull all this together, and it's not going to be easy. And he's going to be the one. Like I said, I think the offense is going to be fine. I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to, be under the microscope if the Eagles lose games. I think if they lose games, it'll be because their defense doesn't come together, or because this whole thing with coordinators and play calling, which Shane Steichen did a very good job of, is kind of not working the way it did last year, and that'll all fall on the head coach. I think if they have problems, I think you'll see a lot of bloom is off the rose for Nick Sirianni kind of stuff. How do you feel about that? Is he in a tricky spot? Does he have to be sort of super, kind of on his toes more than he was in his second year last year?
Probably. I mean, I agree. It's going to be a tougher job this year. Although, if I'm a coach and in his situation, I'd much rather have the team he has to try to do what he has to do than the team that with less talent. What's going to be interesting, defensively, he's basically like all offensive-minded head coaches, is leaving it to the new guy, just like he left it to Jonathan Gannon. I mean, that's not his side of the ball, and he's not going to interfere too much. It's the offense. And the question with the only question I have with the offense is, teams, particularly the teams they're playing this year, the coaches have spent the offseason just breaking down film and trying to kind of like they ran more RPOs last year than any team, but I want to say Atlanta maybe. They're second most in the league. Teams are looking at that, trying to figure out how to deal with Jalen Hurts' legs, how to deal with those, keep him out of those 3rd and 4th and 1s, which were automatic with that orchestrated quarterback sneak. I mean, they're trying to figure out ways to stop that offense this year. And so that's going to be a challenge for Nick to kind of counter, what people are, for Nick and Brian Johnson to counter what people are going to do to try and stop it. So it's going to be a tougher job. He's got, they got a target on their back. That's the biggest challenge that he didn't have last year. I mean, it just makes it tougher when, you're suddenly everybody's homecoming team every week. it is a tougher job for him, Les.
I agree. And I think he's going to have to, he's still a very young coach, you know.
Yeah.
I would really love to talk to Andy Reid about this sometime. I still have contact with Andy, but I don't think he's going to want to sit down with me in any kind of depth at this moment. But he would have some good insights in this, because the first time he went to the Super Bowl, he was still a very young coach comparatively. Yeah. And, I'm sure he learned a lot from that. And now with Kansas City, he has won 2 Super Bowls in a very short period of time. He's been in 3, and, he's made big changes in his team. Yeah. The way he's run his offense has changed from, whether he had Tyreek Hill or didn't have Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of things you can do, but for Nick, this is graduate level study, I think, for a young coach. And I hope he has the kind of people around him. We did have a little bit of a brain drain with Gannon and Steichen both gone. I hope he has the people around him who can kind of help guide him through this.
Yeah. I mean, I've been high on Brian Johnson since they hired him out of the University of Florida. I mean, I just think he's a really smart guy. He was a dual threat quarterback at Utah, all Mountain West, same kind of guy as Jalen. And so, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons they identify so well with each other, besides the fact that they've known each other since Jalen was 4. But I mean, I think having him is like, it is like having Steichen was I think if they're suffering anywhere, it's, and I don't know Alex Tanney very well, but the new quarterbacks coach is a guy that's got to prove himself. I don't think Brian has to prove himself as the coordinator. I think he'll be fine. He had coordinator experience at 3 different places in college, at Utah, at Houston, and then again at his last stop at Florida. So, but you mentioned Andy, Les. It's funny. You go back to before he took the Eagles job. I mean, he was basically a short passing game coach. The West Coast offense. Well, you look at how he's evolved as a play caller and as a schemer. It's just unbelievable. I mean, the people that had him, in a box early in his career that thought this was what he was, I mean, Andy's just fooled them all. I mean, he's a lock for the Hall of Fame, and he'll probably coach as long as Patrick Mahomes can lift his arm. So God knows how many more Super Bowls they'll have before that happens. But, and the same, I mean, so like him, Nick has to evolve too.
Yes. But with Andy, I think about the most searing loss that I've covered as an Eagles beat writer was not so much Super Bowl 39, but it was that 2002 season, the NFC Championship game against Tampa. Today's Andy Reid would not lose that game.
No.
That was the one that I really put on Andy, and that was, that I think that was a great shot to win the championship that year. They only had to beat a bad Raiders team, frankly, in the Super Bowl to win it all. And that history is well trod. But I do think about that when I think about how Andy has changed as a head coach and the things that he does better now than he did back then. And it's I know there are people in Philly who are a little bitter. I'm not, but he had to learn from his mistakes here, and he did. And what a remarkable career he's really had. I had some other things here that I wanted to run past you. One is, this is kind of silly, but it got my attention. So I'm watching the Sixers lose Game 7, and it's really a terrible thing for Philadelphia. People are just crestfallen. It's 10 years of trying to get a team together that can get out of the second round, and they had a 3-2 lead in the series, and they lost. And Devonta Smith of the Eagles is a Celtics fan, and I guess Game 1 he had some things to say, and people had really come back at him. So he goes on Twitter after Game 7 and is giving it to Sixers fans. And there's nothing horrible about that. Obviously, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. He's allowed to root for whoever he wants. But, this is a guy that said he wants to play his whole career here. If you want to be a career Philadelphia guy, to me, you don't want to be on social media tweaking Philadelphians and saying, you people are, this or that. Yeah, that's no, not good. Not the way to do it.
No, I agree. It was kind of a strange thing. It's all fine and good if he wants to be a Celtics fan, but you don't want to pour it on the hometown team. He'll live and learn.
I hope so. He's a pretty smart guy, and he has learned from almost everything that's happened, and I kind of hope he learns from that. We have yet another ad coming up here, Domo, so let's do that, and I'll bring you back, and eventually I'll let you go here.
You are rolling in dough.
Grandchildren to take care of and all that stuff, but let's go to the video ad, and we'll return.
Hey, Birds fans, the NFL schedule has arrived and Philly Sports Trips has all the details now. Visit the site phillysportstrips.com. This is sure to be an epic season. Be sure to go there now to make sure that you don't get shut out. Join us in Tampa, LA, Seattle, or when we get revenge in Kansas City. Don't want to fly? No problem. Gather up your crew and hop aboard one of our signature boisterous bus trips to DC or New York. Sign up now and make sure to mention A2D. Don't miss out on the best Philly fan experience anywhere. Philly Sports Trip customers always stay at the best hotels and meet NFL legends. Book today.
All righty, we are back. And I know
the Molly Pitcher rest stop was not listed on that Sports Trips.
I can't understand it. I mean, there's a Starbucks next door. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to stop.
I think of you every time there's they played the last 2 years that they played the Giants up there, and it's been a late game or a night game. And I think of those Roy Rogers burgers we used to eat at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
That's really a whole thing into itself. I mean, it's an atmosphere. I think Tom Waits you expect to see him sitting there, It's quite a place at 2 a.m. on a Monday, and I hope other people get to experience it as well as we do. We can bequeath that to the younger writers, Domo. Our arteries having already suffered from damage from these meals. We can let EJ and those guys, Jeff, they can step into the breach for us for a while.
Yeah.
Hey, something else here. I don't know if you saw it, but one of the big topics of concern around the draft was Jalen Carter and his conditioning and his focus and all that stuff. Everyone knows he was tangentially involved in a terrible accident when Georgia was celebrating its national championship. He was allegedly drag racing with a staffer who had 2 players in her car, and she wrecked, and the staffer and one of the players was killed. Jalen obviously didn't cause them to wreck, but it was not a great look for him. Then he showed up for his pro day, very out of shape. It seemed like perhaps this whole situation was weighing on him a great bit. There's a civil suit now. So, there's a human off the field kind of component to this that we certainly don't want to minimize at all. I really hope that he's okay and he's learning from these experiences and that we're not going to see anything like that in Philly. But on the on-field side of it, I did see yesterday a video that the Eagles had put out of him doing a cone drill. He looked svelte. He looked quick. He looked great. It was a very short video, but and I didn't get to, in my new role as a retiree, I didn't get to run up to him and say, hey, how you doing? But I don't think anybody did. I don't think any media was down there. But, what are your thoughts on Carter? And, do you have any misgivings about that pick at all?
No, especially not at number 9, Les. You had asked me before the draft started. I think you texted me and asked who I thought they would take, and I said if Carter falls and all they got to do is move up one spot, which is what happened. they should take him. And I mean, as it's been pointed out, I mean, Ringo, the guy they took in the 4th round, the other Georgia, that they now have 5 Georgia players, also has some issues, which is why he dropped. One of the reasons, but they feel they've got the locker room to deal with these guys so that they'll grow up there, they'll mature. I mean, I know people took him off the board or downgraded him, some other teams, but I mean, the Eagles felt he was just too good a player to pass up. And I agree. I mean, him and Jordan Davis, both these are the two anchors of a national championship line in Georgia. Both just have freakish athleticism that I think is, they're just going to be awesome in the middle, I think, for that team. And it's all about, even though they've got a new defensive coordinator, it's all about the front 4 and all about the pass rush. And I think both those guys are going to be dominating players. So I had no problem with them taking them.
All right. Well, speaking of those new coordinators, let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's a pretty big deal. Everybody talks about defense, and that's where most of the personnel changes are, and that's where you maybe expect to see. You'd love to see, as a fan, you'd love to see a more adaptable defense, a defense that can react better to what's going on, so that Andy Dalton isn't like 14 for 14, or that they can get off the field in the second half of the Super Bowl once, perhaps. What do you think of Sean Desai? And he's done one public thing. He talked about wanting people to feel the Eagles' defense, and I think that was the soundbite that most people took away from it. What did you think, and where do you think they're headed there?
I mean, I was a little bit surprised. Yeah, everybody expected it to be the DB coach. Seemed like it was, I mean, both moves seemed automatic. Brian Johnson becoming the offensive coordinator, and another name who escapes me, but their DB coach Wilson becoming the defensive coordinator. That didn't happen. It was pretty obvious right away when they started interviewing people that something was up. I mean, everybody I've talked to about Desai has spoken of him highly. He was brought into the league in 2013, I think, by Mark Trestman. But I mean, he's a Vic Fangio guy. I mean, that's a pretty good guy to be a disciple of. He did a good job in Seattle, working for Pete Carroll. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to see anything terribly different. Both Seattle and Fangio, wherever Fangio's been, don't blitz very much. So we're looking at a front 4 that's going to use their front 4 and very little else. But I like the hire, Les. I thought, I mean, I'm a big, I know Fangio pretty well. We go back to the Philadelphia Stars back in 1984 with him when I first met him, and have known him for, nearly 40 years. So, I mean, he's one of the best defensive coaches that's of the past 20 some years. So, and this guy has kind of studied from him and learned from him. So I think they're in pretty good shape, assuming the players play the way, you would expect them to. I mean, I have some concerns about how much Darius Slay has left. I mean, he's 32. Didn't play particularly well in the second half of the season after a pretty good first half.
Well, he got banged up, but again, that's what happens when you're 32. Yeah, it's not like he's going to be super healthy this year, but because he's a year older. That's
why I
play back just as a writer. Assuming I still get to do that here and there.
He's getting James Bradbury back was such a big thing because I mean, you couldn't not have him, and then if something happens again to him, suddenly a Super Bowl team is going downhill.
They again managed not to draft a corner. It's been like every year, for a year there they had me fooled. There were several years when I would forecast a corner as they definitely have to get one in the first 2 rounds. That'll happen this year. This year, I just like, nah, they're not going to do that, But and there were good reasons not to. But they've got to kind of get that. At some point, there's got to be a real changing of the guard there at corner, and it's a pretty important spot. I'd love to know what they think in private about that. Now, the offensive coordinator, you like him a lot. I like him a lot. I don't know him very well at all, but the fact that he has such a deep relationship with Jalen Hurts and has come up so fast through the coaching ranks and is, very well regarded everywhere I've ever seen, certainly, reassures me quite a bit. The element of this, though, that I have some concern about is play calling, because when Nick first started coaching the Eagles, he called the plays, and it didn't go particularly well. And he gave it to Shane Steichen, and it went way better. And I don't know about Brian Johnson and play calling. I don't know if, what his comfort level is there, what his skill level is. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. And as you said, they're going to have to mix things up more this year because teams know what they would want to do more than they did last year before teams had really seen A.J. Brown in the Eagles offense and so forth. Do you have any feel for that at all? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we had talked about earlier, I mean, he had been an offensive coordinator at 3 different places in college. So he's got play calling experience, a lot of it. Obviously, college, is not the NFL, and that's defense. Defenses are gonna, he's gonna have to outthink some of the smartest defensive coordinators on the face of the earth. So, but I'm fairly confident that if there are some rough patches early, that he'll pretty much, especially with Nick's assistance, that it won't be a problem. I mean, there's some guys I might worry about stepping into this situation. Johnson doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to struggle very much, especially, you had mentioned his relationship with Jalen. I mean, he and the quarterback are on the same page. So, I mean, they're probably going to get a lot of input from Jalen too, as far as the play calling, which is going to help.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, Domo, I'm about ready to let you go here. I know you have a busy afternoon there at Domowitch Manor in lovely Marlton. Best to your better half.
That's a British mystery, Les.
Yeah, that's just something, we can explore this on a future episode. Domo and I are big British mystery fans. We on Amazon Prime. There's a lot of different BritBox, all that stuff. So we text all the time about the tower has started up again, Domo. I don't know if you've checked that out, but there's only one episode up so far, but that looks pretty promising of this new season of the tower. So keep that in mind.
What else?
For all of our fans who are huge British mystery people as we are, I recommend that show.
And I don't know if you know this, but because I think you're the one that first turned me on to Grace, but season 3 is on there.
Yes. It's been, the writing has been up and down on that. But I love the main character, and I think it's a good show, certainly. Take care of yourself out there. Best to your grandson and your wife and everybody. And thanks for coming on.
And we got to do dinner real soon.
Yes, indeed. We certainly do.
You take care.
You take care, Domo. So that was Paul Domowitch. Domo and I spent many years on the road together. Often we'd go to dinner, like on Saturday. Usually with the NFL, the game's on Sunday. You fly in on Saturday. You go somewhere to dinner Saturday night. And we'd often stay in the same hotel, not in the same room, not that kind of relationship. But we would meet in the lobby for dinner. And Domo is one of these very, very organized, very efficient, punctilious people. So Domo would be down in the lobby 5 to 10 minutes before we were supposed to meet. Me, I'm thinking, I can get a run in, I can take a shower, I can check my email, I can, look up ahead, look through some notes for tomorrow, Oh yeah, I've got to go downstairs, don't I? So I would be like at least 5 minutes late most of the time. And Domo was very understanding of this over the years, but it was sort of an Oscar and Felix type of thing where he'd be down there sort of pacing around and like, there you are. And then we go to dinner. So yeah. What else do I need to talk about today? Eagles wise, it's mid-May. There's nothing that pressing. I did want to sort of reiterate that this in the future will be a space to talk about the Eagles, to analyze developments once a week at this time, I hope, on Thursdays. And I will have guests. I have not lined up next week's guest yet. So if you have anybody like really cool in mind, let me know and I'll, reach out to them. I think probably Ted Lasso isn't going to happen, but anything else, we'll give it a good try. It's probably people are going to line up to be on this show. Frankly, now that you've seen it, what a juggernaut it really is. And I am going to try to venture into other things here and there. And there are a lot of people I know in Philadelphia sports who maybe aren't quite as connected to the Eagles, but have interesting stories to tell and things to say. And, we'll jump into that as well here and there. Your comments and questions, you can email me at lbbowen3@gmail.com. People you'd like to see on the show, topics you'd like to see addressed on the show, questions you might have that I can talk about on the show. That'd be cool too. That's about all I have to say today. And I really, again, appreciate A2D Radio for getting me this platform. And I hope to do a better job with it as we go along and be less fumble-fingered with the settings. I got on late today because we couldn't figure out. I bought this fancy microphone, and the microphone works, but the speaker setting for the microphone somehow didn't work. And so they couldn't hear me. I could hear them, and then the vice versa for a while, and it was quite a thing. We didn't have any young techie people here at my house to guide me through this. So eventually, I made my way through the right settings and got it all straightened out. So maybe next week we won't have that, and we'll be on time. Which, if Damo's watching next week, he'll find as quite a shock, knowing me as he does. Until then, I'm Les Bowen. This was Bowen on the Birds. Thanks for everyone who watched and listened, and take care.